All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started here. It's just a minute past the hour. Um, Thanks again for joining us on the webinar. We're going to talk about Impact Dashboard and go through a full demo on the software. My name is Paul Shurin. I'm an economist and principal with Impact Data Source. We are the company behind the software Impact Dashboard. So just as we're going to start here in PowerPoint, we'll jump over to the actual app in a moment. But just kind of touching on all the different aspects of Impact Dashboard. This is software that economic developers can use to collect project information, keep that organized, and then analyze possible scenarios and incentives and different outcomes. So just to kind of give a few screenshots of what we're looking at or what we're talking about here, we'll kind of do that here in the PowerPoint. This is the type of information that we're going to generate with Impact Dashboard. So ultimately, our clients are typically economic developers, and they want to understand how a new prospective project will impact their community. And so we break that down kind of in three different ways. The first one is going to be in terms of their economic impact. And so that's kind of captured up in the left-hand side of this, where we're talking about the direct jobs and spin-off jobs, the salaries and so forth, and even that capital investment. And then ultimately what we want to do is be able to translate that economic impact into the fiscal impact, which we can see on the right-hand side in some detail, and then down below in the chart. This is the fiscal impact, kind of showing the additional revenues that a project might generate for a community, some additional costs that that project may bring as well, and then ultimately boil it down to these net benefits. So really those are the first two things we're going to do. We're going to talk about economic impacts, translate them to fiscal impacts, and then ultimately, again, economic developers very often want to evaluate incentives. And so Impact Dashboard has all three of these elements built into it. So we can look at different types of property tax incentives, the typical rebates or exemptions. We can also look at sales tax rebates and different things, as well as kind of what we call maybe generically non-tax incentives, but this can be thought of as infrastructure grants or job creation grants and different types of things. For example, in this graphic that we see, we're thinking of a $75,000 incentive compared to what this project might generate for us, which in this case is about $250,000 over 10 years. So can we calculate a payback period and a rate of return on that type of investment? So that's the big idea with Impact Dashboard. Again, the economic impact of the project translated into fiscal impacts, and then being able to layer in all this type of economic development incentive analysis. And we have a one-page report that we generate in Impact Dashboard. This one-pager is really great to kind of summarize everything in one page. As I mentioned, we've got our economic impacts, our fiscal impacts, and then even that incentive analysis. So we will take a look at some of the reports in the actual app. We've got a detailed report that kind of reads more like a narrative, but this infographic style report really boils it all down into one nice one-pager. Before we go any further, before we jump into the app, I just want to kind of touch on a few things here just to kind of keep things straight. So Impact Data Source, as I mentioned, is the consulting company here. Impact Data Source was established in 1993 by my partner, Jerry Walker. We're specialized consulting services for economic and fiscal impact analysis. And so the majority of our clients are economic development organizations or governments, and trying to help them understand the impact of economic development projects. And so most of our the projects that we consult on, that we prepare reports for, have an economic development agreement angle to it. And so they want to be able to look at incentives and calculate ROI. Now, Impact Dashboard, as we've been talking about here, is our product. That's the software. That's the web-based app that we've built. We have over 100 clients using the model. Located across the country. We have a pretty big concentration in Texas, but we've got clients throughout the country, in Florida and California and throughout the US. And then those clients, they're primarily economic development organizations, cities or counties in a few states. And in those cases, we have clients that are, below 10,000 population for their region. We also have large metro areas or multi-county regions. So we can build a model kind of for any range there. So I'm going to jump over now to Impact Dashboard and kind of take a look at a couple examples, I guess. So I just switched over now. We can see the main screen here, as we log into Impact Dashboard, we're going to get a list of all of our projects, or in this case, it's a tile view of all of our projects. And so we're on a screen here showing our active projects. We've got different pages to be able to identify projects that maybe we've won or lost, or maybe ones that we've archived. We can search through our projects if we need to by text, or we can kind of filter based on different tags that we've created. And so we can see what those tags are here on a particular project. So we're going to be taking a look at Vandelay Industries today. On this tile, we see Vandelay Industries. This represents a project. This project has two scenarios associated with it. So we've kind of gone through two different iterations of it. You can kind of think of that as like that save as feature. If you're working in an Excel file, you might do a save as just to kind of run a different iteration. And then we can also see a couple tags on this Vandelay Industries project. We've got a tag for recruitment. So it's a recruitment project, and it's in our advanced manufacturing key industry there. So you can kind of build in your key industries and then apply those tags to your projects. We also have a tag there kind of for fiscal year 2020. So you can actually apply a range of other tags. We can look at some of these that I've included, fiscal year 2020, but headquarters project, for example, and different purposes for those tags. Now, if I want to click on this, we're going to go into our project control center here. And as we're looking at this, we're going to see all of the information about this Vandelay Industries project. So in the upper left-hand corner, starting out there, we can see those two scenarios. We've got two different scenarios. We've got them named kind of, in this case, we're distinguishing our scenarios based on the incentive we're considering, but you can name these incentives name these scenarios any way you'd like. So you might distinguish them based on the information that, it's a 100 job scenario versus a 150 job scenario because they're going back and forth or something like that. And as you can see, this one's highlighted. So this one's got a little preview icon selected, and we can see it's highlighted. So this $400,000 infrastructure grant project, this scenario is kind of previewed for us over here. So if we were to, and we will in a moment, if we were to click on this and go into that actual scenario, we would see some of these results, but we can get a sneak peek of those by looking at this preview here. We can see our economic impacts up at the top, and at a high level, at least, our fiscal impacts here over this, our 10-year analysis for about $1 million. Now, if I click on the preview for the other scenario, we'd be able to get a sneak peek of what's going on with that one and what the results were, kind of roughly speaking, for that scenario. So this gives us the ability to kind of really distinguish which scenario we're looking at there and which one we want to go in and edit. So that scenario is the other piece here we have is data forms. So we have in Impact Dashboard created the ability for you to create a customized data form, and then you can post that on your website, or you can even email it to prospects directly. And so you'll configure this data form and include whatever questions you want to ask. Maybe this is your incentive application. Some of our clients will use it that way, but really just to collect all of the project data about this economic development project. And so you can send that out to a prospect by email, or again, post it on your website, and then you'll receive those, and we'll look at this later. You'll receive those in your data form inbox, and then those data forms can be associated with a project, and at a click of a button, we can take the information that prospect provided. We don't have to do any copying and pasting manually. We're just going to click that create scenario button. We're going to take the information that our prospect provided and put it right into our model and be able to generate our results. On the kind of the back end, Impact Data Source, and what we're doing is kind of modeling your local tax structure, your local economy, so that again, all you need to do is provide the information about the project. So again, if the prospect has provided the information in this data form, you can just at a click of a button create that scenario and get your impact results. We do have another way to get information into the model. If you don't use the data form, you can just hit add scenario here, and it'll open up essentially kind of that blank template. Again, with all the back-end data, the taxes and so forth built in there by us, but it'll be asking for those inputs about, jobs created, salaries, and so forth. And you can type that in yourself as the user. The other information that we see on this page, we can see we've selected our project type, our industry, and our tags. We can apply more tags if we want to. And we can even upload documents. For example, if we had different files that we wanted to keep associated with this project, we can upload them right here on the page. But that's everything that's going on here on the control center. So let me jump into our actual scenario. And I want to take a look at the different pages that we've got here in our scenario workspace. So on this first page, this is kind of our scenario info page. This is where we can enter in all of the project specific information. So if you're typing it in, yourself, so maybe you've received the information, this is where you would type that information in. In our case, if we received it from a prospect and we create a scenario using that information, it's going to take that information and plug it in here, and so we won't have to type it in. Now you can modify it. If you create a scenario from a particular data form, you can come in here and modify it. For example, if they call you up and tell you, hey, I put in 85 jobs, but it's actually going to be 95 jobs, you can come right in here and do that and make those changes. So this is our scenario info. Again, we're going to be entering all of this information that we kind of see here on this left-hand side. We want to know information about the jobs, how many of those workers might relocate to the area, what are the salaries, what's the capital investment, and what are some of the other relevant impacts. We're looking at a project in the state of Texas, so we've got inventories and this conception of taxable purchases and taxable sales. On the right-hand side, we're giving a kind of a dashboard view of our results as it stands. So as we're calculating things, or as we're typing in the information on the left-hand side, the right-hand side is showing you the result in real time. We can see the impact for the city. We can click here and see what the impact is for the county or the school district or any of those jurisdictions. We're seeing our impact in terms of jobs, salaries, and capital investment, and then our fiscal impact in terms of benefits, costs, and net benefits. So in this graph, if we're looking at it, these dark blue bars are representing our annual benefits that we're collecting. And so if I hover over these, I can see each year. If I were to stack these dark blue bars on top of each other, it would add up to $1.8 million over the 10-year term. Now, this analysis is using a 10-year time frame. You can adjust that. So within our settings, and I won't get in there just yet, but within our settings, you can adjust whatever term of the analysis that you want it to be. So if it was needed to be 20 years or 25 years, whatever, you can do that. The costs are represented by kind of those lighter blue bars below the line, so those negative numbers that we see here. If we add all of those up, stack them on top of each other, that would be equivalent to about $730,000 of costs. So when we put all of that together kind of on a year-by-year basis, we're seeing the net value, the net benefit that we're getting each year. If we wanted to add all of those up, that's going to be about $1 million over the 10 years. We can also kind of get these numbers in a table format if that's more helpful. Sometimes it is. But the graph is useful to help you kind of understand how the revenues will accrue over time. The next tab that we've got here is our public support tab. And this is where you'd be able to kind of layer in the possible incentives that you're considering. So if you click here on the left-hand side, we can go to a tab for each one of our jurisdictions. So for example, if the city was going to offer a property tax exemption, we could add that in here. I've got the schedule plugged in here as a previous example, but I haven't enabled it. So if I were to click that button, we would be adding that in, and that property tax exemption would be modeled in our analysis. This graph is kind of similar to that net benefits graph, but this one's just focused on the property taxes that the city would receive. And we're backing out the property taxes that might be exempted under this scenario, and then getting down to our net collections. Now, the terminology is flexible here as well. You might be looking at a property tax exemption, or you might call it a rebate or an abatement or a reimbursement. And so you can adjust whatever is appropriate. I'm going to get rid of that property tax exemption for the purposes of this, but you can see just as easily as I clicked it on, I can click it off. If I scroll down, you can see there's opportunities to model different types of sales tax rebates, even a hotel tax rebate. And then finally, the one that we have enabled here is this $400,000 non-tax incentive. So in this case, we were modeling essentially an infrastructure grant. So the company needed about $400,000 to put in some infrastructure for this project. And we plugged in $400,000 in year one, and we calculated the impact of that against our net benefit. So the way we look at this is a $400,000 incentive. We're going to treat that as an investment in the project. And so in our case, that $400,000 is getting paid out in year one. And now the return on this investment is going to be reflected by the net benefits that the city is generating, or the project will generate for the city over the time period. So in this case, if we remember, it was about $1 million of net benefits over 10 years for the city. And so we're comparing this orange line, this stream of revenue, stream of net benefits that the city will receive, to this initial investment of $400,000. We can see the payback period, the point at which these two lines kind of intersect, will be somewhere between years 2 and 3. If we calculate it out, we can see that it's about 2.6 years. So this is telling us the point at which the project will generate enough net benefits to pay back the value of that incentive or that investment. Now, we can calculate a rate of return as well. Here we're doing an average annual rate of return. And so we're just kind of figuring out if it's $1 million over 10 years, that's about $100,000 a year. And if our initial investment was $400,000, that's about a 27% average annual rate of return as we calculate it there. We're running the per job incentive just by dividing by the total number of jobs that were created from this project, which I think was 95. And so there's our total incentive. I'm going to click over now to our report tab, and we're going to see the different options for our reporting for all of this information that we're able to generate. So first up is kind of a straightforward fact sheet. So this one, we're not going to do any analysis. We've gone into the weeds a little bit already on some of the impacts and calculations and so forth. But on this fact sheet, we're gonna step back a moment and just lay out all the facts of the project. So in this case, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, this is a recruitment project in our advanced manufacturing industry. We can see there's an address being considered there, a particular site. We can see our NAICS code. The NAICS code there on the left-hand side at the top is a particular manufacturing NAICS code. They're looking for about 75,000 square feet. They're going to purchase land and construct a new building. They've got their timeline there. They've also got the employment noted, the number of employees that they plan to hire, their capital investment, and also kind of a look at their payroll in terms of average salary, as well as kind of the annual payroll once they get to full operations. On the right-hand side, we also have some information about the company. We've indicated the company name is confidential here, but you can actually turn that on if you want to put the name of the company on the report here. And then I've added some additional descriptions here just to kind of, really lay out the facts on this project. And so we're explaining what the project is seeking to do, how this project fits into our community and why it's a good match for our strategic plan, for example. And then also we can see our recommendations that we might be considering. And so all of this text that we see down here is controlled by you. So you can go in and type in and add some of these descriptions. You don't need to use this terminology. So for these labels, you can relabel them if you want to use something different. If you don't want to have, a description at all, for example, you could just leave that blank and it wouldn't show up. But this is a really nice kind of cover page, so to speak, when you're presenting a project, just to be able to lay out all of the basic facts about the project. Now, the summary report and the detailed report, this is where we get into our calculation. So we'll first look at this summary report. We kind of looked at in the preview, we looked at an example of this. So for the city of Burleson, this is, again, trying to tie in all of our, the main things we're interested in as an economic developer. So we've got our economic impacts in the upper right-hand corner, kind of touching on the number of direct jobs versus spin-off jobs, the salaries that would be paid, the capital investment, and even touching on kind of the residential impact of this project. Will there be people moving to the area? Will they be building homes and that sort of thing? Now, these fiscal impact numbers that we see up here, we've already seen. So we're just repeating those net benefits here that we see. But down here, we've got a little bit more detail on the source of the different benefits, costs, and then ultimately the net benefit calculation. So we can see this project is going to generate, some sales taxes for us, about $240,000, different types of property taxes across the board there that we can see, and some various other revenues that we're calculating. On the cost side, we're incorporating the cost of government services and the cost of providing kind of those monthly utility services. Again, that cost of utility balances kind of that city-owned utility revenue line that we see here. On the right-hand side down here, we're looking at an incentive analysis. This, again, is information that we looked at earlier, where we had the $400,000 incentive kind of treated as an investment. And we compare that to the revenues that the project generates, roughly, 1 or 1.1 million over the 10-year period. So those same numbers are visible to us for the 2.6 million, or excuse me, 2.6 year payback period, excuse me. And on this one pager, again, we're only focused on the city of Burleson, but we can also see down here that the county, the school district, and some of the other jurisdictions are receiving revenue or net benefits from this project as well. So it's important to remember, while the city gets about $1 million, the county is going to get 300,000 or 360,000, I should say. So if we wanted to, we could actually pull up a one pager for the county. And so see what the county is going to get out of this. We've got all our jurisdictions listed out here. We actually have one additional one that we see here called community report. This is kind of one of those reports that we can configure. So for example, if we wanted to put a one pager together that included the impact from the city and the county, and let's throw in the school district as well, we can do that. And so we can kind of add any jurisdiction that we've estimated the impact for, and we've got that on our one pager. So now our benefits, costs, and net benefits represent those three districts that we've included, and we can see the impact here. So those one pagers are great. We can print those off or save them as a PDF. Just click on that print button. If we go to our detailed report, this one's not going to fit on one page, but if we go here, it's going to print off maybe into 10 to 15 pages, depending on the different elements that we've included. This one's the more traditional report, has a typical narrative and so forth, and explains what's going on with the project. If we scroll down here, we can see we've got different sections. So on the left-hand side, we can jump to those different sections. For our economic impact overview, we're going to show that the economic impact in terms of jobs and salaries here. We're going to show a summary of the population impact. So that's that idea that you've got workers that may move to the area. They might bring with them, spouses and children. They might build property. They might, have new students attending the local school district. So we've got that information summarized there. And then we're also going to be very explicit and kind of show what we're estimating in terms of the taxable property that'll be added in the city. Now, we're going to be using the capital investment numbers to kind of estimate the taxable property. And there's a number of settings that you can go in and modify to say, if they're going to spend, for example, $15 million, if they're going to invest $15 million, how much of that 15 million will actually come onto the tax rolls, and then how will that change over time? So we're going to typically see things like real property appreciation, and so you have a factor there. And then with business personal properties, kind of the FF&E there, that might be subject to depreciation. And so over time, as we see it here, we've got a depreciation schedule modeled there. So that's our economic impacts. If we jump down to the fiscal impact overview, we can see all of our jurisdictions in one big table. So we've got the city, the county, the school, and some of these other jurisdictions, and we can see what the benefits, costs, and net benefits are in each case. We're actually doing a present value calculation here as well. You can set your discount rate. In this case, I think we're using 5%. Now, after the fiscal impact overview, we've got our public support overview. In this case, this is where you'd be able to show kind of the total package of an incentive. In this case, it only includes this $400,000, so kind of bottom line numbers 400,000. But if you wanted to combine maybe the impact of the tax incentive as well as an incentive from the county and something like that, you'd be able to get a picture of your full incentive package there. And then the remainder of this report is just going to go through each one of those jurisdictions. And these are numbers that we've seen before, the $1 million in net benefits for the city. But we've got a little bit extra detail shown here. So we're breaking it out, whether or not this impact is generated by the project itself or from those new households, from the new workers moving to the area. So in this case, that split is shown pretty heavy, that the project itself is generating most of that $1 million. We have a little bit of a methodology section here that will explain some of the calculations and some of the approach that you can take a look at as well. So that's the big idea here. I'll click into our settings area where we can take a look at some of the things I might have already modified. So here in our general assumptions, I've modified some of these inputs. So for example, this input here that's highlighted in yellow, it's telling us the default value was originally 100%, but I put in 80%. This is the percent of building and improvement costs that represent market value. So this one, what I was doing here was the idea that they're going to invest $5 million in a brand new building. So they're actually going to spend 5 million. So we want to capture the fact that they're going to spend 5 million, but it's only going to come onto the tax rolls for say $4 million. And so that's where we're using this 80% to reflect that adjustment. We can see there's a number of other assumptions here that we can modify. If we look at a particular jurisdiction, we can make changes on this information as well as needed. Generally speaking, the information that we're looking at here for the city is going to be just kind of the tax structure and help us model it. So this is the information that, again, Impact Data Source is going to build into your model. And you won't really need to either load this information, and you really don't need to modify it on an individual analysis in most cases. If you do need to modify something, you certainly can. You'll just click that Edit Defaults button and start making changes. The other thing here in the settings would be where you can also model a TIF district. I'm not going to get into that. So tax increment financing can be modeled in here if we want to. Essentially, it just adds another jurisdiction that's going to receive a portion of the revenues that otherwise might be going to the city or the county, for example. I'm not going to get into that right now for today's demo. And so this is a lot of the functionality of kind of a typical project. We're using multipliers in this case to calculate our jobs. I didn't talk about this yet, but we can briefly touch on it. If I click here on this NAICS code, this is where that kind of all comes together. So we can specify a specific NAICS code here. You can do that either by typing in some words, like if it's a warehousing project, you can do that, general warehousing and storage maybe, and it'll pull in the multipliers appropriate for that industry. Now, maybe if we want to get back to our rubber manufacturer, we can type it with the words, or we can actually type in the numbers in case I don't really remember that number, but we can, the 326299, we could type that in or just find it based on words. So as we make that selection, it's pulling in a type 2 employment multiplier and a type 2 earnings multiplier. We're using RIMS2 multipliers in this analysis. So those come from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and they're going to be specific to your region. When you tell us what industry it is, they're going to be industry specific as well. So in this case, for every direct job that's created, there's going to be about 1.7 total jobs created in the community. That includes the one direct job and then 0.7 spin-off jobs. The spin-off jobs include both the indirect and induced impacts. If you need to, you can always overwrite these multipliers, kind of enter your custom multipliers. And you can also, we've added this toggle for us if you're trying to kind of run a quick scenario to say, well, what happens if we get rid of all of the spin-off impact? How does that affect our net benefit? So if you just kind of toggle that off, we can see it was about $1 million before, and it's about $1 million after. So in this case, that spin-off benefit doesn't really generate a lot in terms of those net benefits, although it's probably an important piece of the economic puzzle here, so to speak. That is a lot of the information I wanted to show here. We can certainly take questions. If anyone has questions, you can type those into our Q&A there. I'm also going to show a little bit about the data forms. So if I click on this, if I click on the data form, it'll actually just pull up the data form that prospect submitted. And so this, if you think about it, you've created your data form template, you've put it out there, and now this prospect has submitted it to you. And so this is what it looks like when you receive it. So I'm looking at this. This is you can think of this like a PDF, because all of this information is kind of frozen in time from the point that that prospect hit submit on the data form. And so if we look at this, it starts off with a summary, and this is actually really nice because you can get a pretty good understanding of what's going on with this project just by looking at these bullet points as we're looking at it. So this is telling us it's a brand new business in the community. They're going to purchase some land and construct a new building. They got the timeline. They're going to hire 85 jobs. They're going to pay them $70,000. So this is really, really nice to be able to kind of take in. Now, if you scroll down, you'll see exactly what the prospect provided you on each screen of the data form wizard. And so as I scroll down, this is what they actually filled out. But the summary, it really kind of helps you kind of read through that information quickly. Now, you can print this off. This is really nice if you need a physical copy, or ultimately save it as a PDF there. If I go back here, that's our data form. Now, how did we do that whole part with the data form? How do we ask a prospect to fill out a data form? So if we click over here, I'm going to go into our data forms area. And so I'm going to start by going to the inbox. This is where you're going to receive data forms. So we're looking at a list of data forms that I've received in my inbox, and I can click on that and kind of see what they submitted. It looks just like that last one. But typically the workflow would be you get a data form in your inbox and you would assign that to a project. So either create a brand new project or assign it to an existing project. The other thing on this inbox page is where we can take a look at people who may have started a data form but not submitted it. And so I can get a list of all of my data forms that are in progress. And I can also see kind of how far people have made it into filling out the data form. So for example, if I needed to follow up with someone, I could come in here and kind of click this share button and say, hey, let me help you complete the data form request. And so you can email that person, and this would give them a link back to their data form. And that would kind of help them get back into their data form if that was the holdup. Now, the other thing, if you just wanted to kind of click on this and take a look at what that person had filled out so far, you can do that as well. So you can kind of see what someone is filling out as they go along by kind of seeing it here in progress. We've got a list of assigned data forms. This is that one we were just looking at for Vandelay Industries. So these are all the data forms that I've received and then assigned to a project, and I can even kind of quick link jump to that project. Now, in order to kind of start getting some either in progress or into your inbox, you'll create a template. So I'm going to click on this template. I actually, each tile here represents a different template that I've created. You might not really create 4 different templates. You might only have one, or maybe you have 2 different versions. You might have a short one and a long one or something like that. If I click on this basic data form, this is going to show us the type of information that we can configure here. So I can put a title on my application. And so maybe if I'm going to call it an incentive application, I can put my contact information so that if people run into questions, they can contact me. That's my contact information, but this would be, in your case, you would put your contact information there. We have a welcome page, so we can kind of put a custom message there. And we can choose which questions we want to include on that data form. So if we don't really care about square footage, we can uncheck that one as we have unchecked it here. If I scroll down here, we can see we've got the major ones checked. And so if we want to see what this looks like, we can go to our preview. And the way the prospect is going to interact with this is on the preview, is on a wizard basis. So if I click on this preview wizard, this is what it looks like for the prospect. So they're going to see kind of this welcome page with your logo. So that's my kind of sample ED Corporation logo. And this is my custom message, but this will be your contact information, your message, your logo. As you hit get started, you're going to ask for their name, for their email address, and their kind of their role, what their position is. And you hit next here. We want to get straight on whether this is a new business or an existing business. And so the critical point here is in the specific community. And because this brings up the idea for economic developers, which is very, very common, this idea of retained jobs versus new jobs. And so I'll kind of show that here in the data form. I'm going to leave this as an existing business that's currently operating in the community. When I hit next here, we've got some branching. It's all built into the app, built into the wizard here. And so because I'm saying it's an existing business, we're going to start off with a section that asks about the company's current operations. And we want to ask about the company's current operations to distinguish this from any possible expansion plan. And so we're going to step through there. We're going to ask what their current site is, maybe what the NAICS code is for their current activity, the number of people they currently employ and the average salaries paid. We want to know about the market value of the property that they own. And then ultimately, we're going to ask about, the expansion. Are you planning an expansion? Yes. In which case, we're going to go through a series of questions, asking them, for example, if they're going to have a new site, what's that address? Is the NAICS code going to be the same? How many new jobs are you going to be creating? What are the salaries? Will there be a capital investment? And all that sort of information. So the app is going to really help you keep things straight. A lot of times on static forms, on PDFs and that sort of thing on these applications, it can get really confusing, and you can see that in the responses of prospects. As you read it, it just doesn't make any sense. They were confused. It didn't, they're filling out information that just isn't accurate. And so we try to take that out of it here with this electronic data form. One of the cool things you can do here is also ask for kind of a project description, so any additional background they might want to provide about it. And you can ask them to attach documents. So this is customizable text. So in my case, I wanted them to upload a site plan and a hiring schedule, but you could ask for maybe different documents, or you don't have to ask for documents at all. We can walk through some information that we collect about the company itself, and this is kind of a limited version in my basic data form, but there's other questions that could be asked. And then the main point of contact as we do this. And then finally, for the prospect, when they're filling out this data form, we're going to repeat back everything they just told us. And so this is really nice, again, with this idea that sometimes it's clear on PDF or Word data forms. The prospect just didn't understand a question. But when you repeat it back to them in this format, it becomes clear, and they can go in and modify as needed. They can go in and modify straight from this page different inputs that might be relevant. And now as they get through this, they can hit submit and send. As they do that, they're going to be reminded that once they submit this form, they won't be able to make any more changes. So that's where we're going to kind of freeze it in time, so they can't go back and start making changes as you continue, as you start your analysis and running those scenarios. So if they do need to make changes to the information that they provided to you, they would have to give you a call and kind of talk through that. And then you would be able to model it in your scenario. You'd be able to modify the values there. So I'm going to hit X out of that, and I'm going to actually X out of the preview. But that's the way that it would be, that it would work here for the prospect. Now for you, you're going to configure your data form just like we looked at there, and then we can share it. And so there's two different ways we can share this data form. One would be to send an email to a prospect directly. So you know who you're working with, you need to send them the link to go fill out this data form all online. You can type in their email address, modify this information, and hit send. The other way you can do it, which a lot of our clients are beginning to do, is to actually post a link on their website. So anytime someone clicks on that link, it's going to generate a new version of that electronic data form, and they'll be able to fill in their information. And so this would be like, if you have, a lot of our clients will have a PDF or a Word document posted on their website as a link that they can download, and then that prospect will fill it out and email it back to you. In this case, it's going to be all done online. So you'll just post this link, or maybe put a button on your website and with this link behind it, and it'll go out and walk them through that data form wizard. And you'll be able to see every time someone starts a data form and every time someone submits a data form. So you'll be notified once someone hits submit. You'll get a notification in your email to log back in here and see the submitted data form. If there are any questions, again, feel free to type those in. I don't see any yet, but I am going to show one last thing here, one little wrinkle on a project, just to kind of show one more thing that's common for economic developers. So we talked about this idea of a business retention and expansion project. And so I want to look at one of those. So I've got this project DM, and I want to look at, we'll look at scenario one. It kind of doesn't matter here. This is another project, but this one has the added wrinkle that the company is an existing company that is planning an expansion. And so in kind of their responses, they told us that they represent an existing business planning and expansion, right? And so we've got that in here, and we can see right here, this is a brand new section that we didn't see previously when it was a recruitment project. We're asking about the current operation. So again, these are pieces of information that we would have asked the prospect in the data form, and that ties now into our analysis. So here's a section on the company's current operations. We can see they currently employ 65 workers, and they pay those $60,000 a year. If we click next here, continue, we can see that they're planning to hire 250 new workers, and that's associated with the expansion. And so what that, by kind of modeling it this way, we can kind of slice and dice the way that we want to look at these results. So right now we're looking at, as I mentioned, 65 existing jobs, retained jobs, and 250 new jobs. If we add that together, that's 315. So that's when we see 315 direct jobs, that's where that's coming from right now. And this analysis that we're looking at here, this kind of snapshot, is showing us the impact of the current operations as well as the expansion. So if we look up here, we've got this toggle, and we were currently selected on total combined. And this is where we're showing the total combined value of the company through its current operations and the planned expansion over the next 10 years. So the net benefits from that, everything together, is $2.5 million. Now, if I hit expansion only, because maybe you want to be a little bit more conservative, or maybe you just want to, identify what's the value of the expansion, because, the total value of the company is nice to know, but what's the business, what's the expansion? So if I hit expansion only, this is going to toggle all of our results here, and we can see that the direct job impact is just the 250 new jobs that are being planned. And the other piece we were looking at was the net benefit. The net benefit has dropped by about $1 million, or a little over $1 million, to show only about $1.4 million in net benefits. So if we go to our reports, we actually account for all of this information on here as well. In this case, our fact sheet is kind of responsive to that, so we can kind of toggle that. If we show our total combined here, we can see that it's 315 jobs, 250 new, 65 retained. We can see the amount of the payroll associated with the retained portion or the new portion. We can also see some of the other information here. But on the impact reports, this is where it kind of gets really cool. We can look at this total combined impact. Again, we're showing 250 new jobs, 65 retained. That means there's going to be 315 direct jobs. We kind of do that weighted average between those salaries. It's about $50,000, $51,000 for those direct workers on a combined basis. And this is showing us our 2.5 million in net benefits. So that's that big number when everything's combined. We've actually we're looking at a $1 million incentive here. And if we compare $1 million against the 2.5 million, we can calculate that payback period. It shows about 3.8 years. Okay, so if you wanted to be a little bit more conservative, you might kind of flip this switch here and say, let's still think, if we're still thinking about $1 million for this project, but let's see if we can get the payback to be within reason if it's just the expansion. So I can click this toggle again. We're going to switch everything up. We're still looking at our $1 million, but now our net benefits, as we see here and kind of throughout, are 1.4 million instead of 2.5. So now we're still looking at $1 million against those net benefits. This orange line has come down because the benefits are less when we're just looking at the expansion. And our payback period has stretched out now to 6.6 years. So that's still a reasonable, in my mind anyway, a reasonable payback period of 6.6 years. But again, it would be much less if we looked at it with a broader view, 3.8 years, if we're kind of giving them quote unquote credit for their existing operations. We can see how this changes. If we just look at the expansion, it'll kind of show the 250 jobs. It'll clarify that the summary doesn't include the impact from the company's current activity, including 65 retained jobs. On the detailed report, we mix it up a little bit too. We can actually add a section that shows us kind of in different column form what the impact is for current operations, what it is for the expansion, and then what that is in total combined. So this is helping us kind of see some of those things. And here, if we look at this one, this is our fiscal impact in terms of those net benefits. We knew that the total combined was about 2.5 million for the city. The expansion was 1.4, and now we can see the current operations represent about 1 million. If I scroll down here, we can see, for example, on the city, we can see some of these revenues. If we want to see the combined, we can actually break that out based on the current activity or the expansion to get that total of the 2.5. So lots of different analysis things that we can do there on these expansion projects, which are very common. And it's ultimately going to be up to the particular user and to the particular instance, which one's more appropriate to use there in terms of, as we were looking at, which way to compare this. A lot of times, if you think of it as kind of an all or nothing, for example, if the 65 jobs are at risk of if you're at risk of losing those jobs, you might take this broader view and say, okay, this is the way to look at it. It's 2.5 million in net benefits. It represents 315 jobs. But in other instances, you might be a little bit more conservative and just focus on the expansion. Still not seeing any questions, so I'm going to start to wrap this up. But if you have more information, or if you want more information about this, please reach out to us. My name again is Paul with Impact Data Source. You can just reach me at paul@impactdatasource.com by email. And ultimately, Impact Dashboard is provided on an annual subscription basis. We will take care of all the tax information and local economic data in the background. You will just be using the data form to collect information, or maybe typing the information in yourself. And we are available as a part of that subscription. We're available for questions or kind of help you walk through or review studies. If you ran an analysis, it just doesn't look right. Why is it doing something weird? We can jump on a screen share with you and look at that together. We can follow up by email if you reach us. We can also schedule demos on our website by finding a spot on your calendar. So that's a really nice feature if you want to get a one-on-one demo or talk about something unique in your community. But again, thanks so much for joining us today. And please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks so much.